G'day there, how's it going? As a recent joiner at Kiama, albeit as an enthusiastic non-skiing member, this yarn about the club's beginnings and its growth over the years certainly helped me make sense of you skiing nutters who occupy the place every winter. It must have been one hell of a bloke who got Kiama Club built and then taught a bunch of South Coast farmers how to ski. There's hope for me yet. So sit back and ignore our beautiful view from the lodge, at least for long enough to hear this tale of a club in the snowy that actually kicked off the cooperative movement here in Australia. Whether you're watching as a family, a trout fisherman, a ski bunny, a mountain climber, or like me as a lover of that marvellous Kiama stone fireplace and a home-cooked meal shared with new friends, what you're about to see is a fascinating piece of Australian history. Enjoy.
Kiama, a seaside town on the New South Wales south coast, 2 hours drive from Sydney. Today, in 2008, it is known for its captivating coastal and rural scenery, beaches, rainforests, bushwalks, parks, delightful eateries and boutique shopping.
On behalf of Kiama Council, councillors, members of staff and the Kiama community, I wish to extend our congratulations to the Kiama Alpine Club on their 50th anniversary. The essence of Kiama to me is still very much the same, a very vibrant and active community, but also very community minded. Like when you look at and read the story of Kiama Lodge, it really only came about through people within the community that had an idea, and they put that idea into action and volunteered their time and their effort to make it happen. And also, thank you for your contribution to the social life and community spirit of Kiama and establishing that great link between the mountains and the sea.
Dairy farming on lush pastures continues, though not on the scale of the past. Here we see the Honey family and Gary Gray at work. Past President Terry Gallagher recalls the town in 1958.
Kiama in the late 50s, early 60s, as I recall, was predominantly a dairy district, a fishing port and blue metal quarries.
Life member John Fraser adds his thoughts.
It was a very happy holiday resort. I remember the shopkeepers used to say, without the summer holidays we wouldn't be able to live in Kiama and do business here. But it's always been a pleasant town, and we still meet a lot of people from Sydney who, we used to go there for our holidays, the famous Brighton Hotel. Yeah.
Sport then consisted of tennis, cricket for the men, as Jeff Boxall dispatches one to the boundary, and hockey for the ladies. Chamberoo won the Group 7 Rugby League Premiership in 1958, and Kiama the Under-18 Rugby League Premiership. Here, current Alpine Club President Alan Fredericks is shown receiving his blazer. The formation of the Kiama Rugby Club was still 3 years away. Kiama has always had a respectful relationship with the ocean. Surf lifesaving and visiting the beach were always popular. The Kiama surfboat crew won the state title in 1958-59, captained by Dallas Tidmarsh with Bruce Piggott in the bow. The Tidmarsh family were later to relocate to Jindabyne, where sons Graham and Rodney became very active in the alpine community. In the 1950s, the thriving dairy industry was desperate for veterinary surgeons. Jeff Boxall outlines Dr. Eugene Baranowski's arrival in Kiama.
I know that he graduated at Leipzig University in Germany. He came out here and went to a migrant camp in Victoria. He and Lola and the 2 young girls, as they were at that stage. How they got to come here, I'm not too certain. There were limited veterinary surgeons available, and in fact in those early days a a couple of vets, Australian vets, were obtained, and they moved off into probably small animal practice, and they did have a lot of trouble obtaining the services of veterinary surgeons. My father was the secretary of the veterinary co-op, and I think it was George Boris and Eugene Baranowski were the first two that came into view, and the veterinary cooperative engaged them, but as it turned out they weren't registered in this country, and the local vets reacted to that and challenged them in court. They were changed provided they did a 1-year course.
At that time and earlier, skiing in Australia largely consisted of setting out from the Kosciuszko Hotel on Perisher Road for the main range, as seen here in David Waters' collection. Mount Carruthers and Little Austria on the western face were always popular. At times, facilities were rudimentary at best. For Dr. Eugene Baranowski, wife Lala and family, Mount Franklin in the Brindabella Ranges was their preferred trip, and occasionally through the elements to Smiggin's Hole. Kiama was about to learn of the full force of this Ukrainian migrant's vigour and enthusiasm. On the Easter weekend of 1958, Eugene and Lala took rural supplies businessman Keith Young to Thredbo. By chance, an adrenaline-rushing helicopter ride over the valley convinced Keith to back this couple in their vision of a Kiama Alpine lodge in the mountains. Keith Young and Jeff Honey were just too enticed to the top of the mountain. Back on the south coast, businessmen and the rural community had been co-opted to attend a meeting at the Brighton Hotel and form the Alpine Club of Kiama. And the man that started it all? John Fraser comments.
There's only one man responsible for all that. That was Eugene. A fine man, and he was so strong a character that you felt you'd support him whatever he attempted, and whatever he attempted, he always succeeded in. He was a wonderful vet, and so were his fellow countrymen that came down with him, and they were a wonderful asset to the dairy industry. But it was the strength of his character that carried everybody along. A happy man, enjoyed life. Pity he wasn't still here.
John East tells us more.
Well, the first thing we did was had a weekend, stayed at Port Kembla RSL over at Perisher, and went around to have a look at where it was going to be. And Eugene, of course, was the guiding light, and he had already gone down and put a deposit on the land and took it from there. And we started off by having people put in money, and then again the personnel that came in. They had 7 people who, I think it was 7, who put in $300 or pounds in those days, and then we got money from everywhere else until we raised about $6,500 to $7,000 pounds.
We asked Joan Fraser what locals thought.
I suppose a lot of them were too polite to say what they really thought, but a lot of them said, "What on earth do you want to do something like that for? It's so far away, it's something you've never done before. How do you know you'll even like it or want to be involved with it anyway?" Others weren't as negative, and as John said, Eugene and other people were very enthusiastic, and we felt it was a challenge, and we were young and we wanted to be in it.
John East continues.
We went about building a hut. We had a chap called McClurkin design the hut, which was a shocker at the start, but it cost us a lot of money just to have him. But anyway, they went ahead and built it. And if you remember the old hut, it was a straight building with nothing to it.
Arriving in Thredbo in 1960, our locals were surprised at the amount of snow. The Kiama Lodge was now established, and the village of Thredbo was expanding. Eugene relished the challenge of teaching the Kiama and Nowra members how to ski. Enjoy the snow. And well, ride the T-bar. And showing how it should be done. Travelling to the snow was always a challenge, as Joan Fraser explains.
Next day we'd set off again for Thredbo because the roads weren't good. Even the best roads weren't terribly good. And the worst part of the road was the last part from Jindabyne into Thredbo, which was unsealed. It was rough, big potholes, and we always wanted to get into Thredbo before it got dark or cold in the evening. We were worried about ice on the road, and also animals. There seemed to be more sort of wallabies and wombats or emus in those days that could pop out of the bush.
Joan talks about the fashions on the slopes.
When Alan asked me to talk about fashions, the first thing that came to mind was, well, what fashions? Because that wasn't on our agenda at that time. We knew we had to keep warm and keep dry. That was our main consideration. And there were no shops as such to cater for purely ski clothes. Paddy Parlin was in town and we used to go to him occasionally, but he was mainly for bushwalking, hiking, camping, that sort of thing.
Following these remarks on fashions, one of our members once commented on how the introduction of stretch ski pants had transformed skiing into a spectator sport. Fashion was not the only thing transforming in the 1960s, as facilities on the mountain had also expanded and improved. For the first years of the 70s, I was the club president. We were moving from a decade of youthful exuberance, excitement and adventure of the 60s to one of consolidation and contemplation of the future of the 70s. Recovering from the trauma of the lodge's boiler explosion in 1968, the committee set about debating the needs and future direction of the club, its members and its lodge. It looked at opportunities put forward by the National Park and Wildlife Service for lodges at Guthinger, Smiggins Hole and Perisher, and made a serious bid for a site at Charlotte's Pass in 1979. Also considered in the early part of that decade were opportunities at Jindabyne and the first Roslin Lodge at Thredbo, which had an asking price of $42,000 in 1973. During that decade we saw a succession of presidents, including Fred Wynne, Ian Vickery and Mark Shukovich, closely assisted by Vice Presidents Peter Hewlett and John Hinton, together with their respective committees, all investigated these opportunities. It was also a time when sporting clubs were forced to face the concerns of liabilities of their committee members, and when fire regulations in the national park, particularly those of alpine lodges, were being written. Ultimately, the club determined to concentrate their efforts on developing the existing generous block in Thredbo and expanding the lodge there. All of these factors contributed to the direction the club took into the 1980s.
As once more, Terry Gallagher recalls.
The early 80s, there was an issue in relation to the lease and a proper utilisation of the site at Thredbo. And being in property development, I suppose I had a natural leaning towards utilising the site in the most efficient way. And so for 2 years I was president, and we were able to have plans drawn up and finance the club so that we had a new facility there that more appropriately utilised the site the way that it should have been used. And at the same time, keeping it as a family lodge with not too many members. Accepting new members who weren't families from Kiama was a little difficult, and there were problems getting people to accept that. Generally, the committee and members of the Alpine Club realised that this was a way of ultimately funding the club without external borrowings. So, as it turned out, those new members were either friends or associates of existing members. And so there wasn't really the total new face, but there was a commonality there. Working bees at Kiama have always been fairly well attended. And I consider the membership is still fairly small compared with other organisations. And when you have a small membership, you always get a personal attendance in people looking after something that they personally feel they've built up themselves. And I think that's the way it should be.
From pioneer beginnings, adventure and camaraderie, progress always continued. Despite setbacks like this, the members have for over 50 years toiled to improve the lodge facilities to now boast one of the most modern and comfortable club lodges in the Australian Alps.